I have a question, Stuart. Um, what is happening with all the kriyas? Should we be striving more for a smooth flow of the energy and eliminating the kriyas over time?
The kriyas will eliminate themselves once the blocks inside you are broken down. I wouldn't start doing that. The meditation will become something in your head. Just let the kriyas do their work, and they will unblock you, and then basically they'll, I don't know if they'll completely stop, but they will get pretty minimal.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
I have a question, Stuart.
Yes.
I have a lot of resistance to forgiving myself and accepting that I'm a good person. And I want to know how I can overcome that.
Well, let me ask you something. Can you answer that question? I mean, look, Isabel, just open your heart. I keep telling you, just think about the way you were living 5 years ago, 7 years ago, what your life was like, what it's like today, what you're doing with your life today. How can you beat yourself up? When you think you should have so much gratitude for the change that's taken place in your life. I have infinite gratitude when I see you today for the changes that have taken place in your life. That in itself, should be enough to keep you from beating yourself up, from not being worthy. That's all it is. And it's a matter of opening your heart and just feeling grateful for the life that God has given you. And I think God has given you an amazing life. It's like a lotus flower coming out of muddy water. It's exactly what it's like. And you not finding that self-worth, not being grateful for how far you've come in your life, it's a disservice to higher energy in the universe. What you're talking about now are patterns that you lived with when you were much younger. I wouldn't say when you're young, because you're pretty young now. When you were much younger. And why do you keep pulling them up? They're just things of the past. Let them go. Be grateful for what this amazing world that you have been given in the last 5 years. Otherwise, you'll get caught in a swamp, for God's sake, of your own emotions, your own insecurity, your own, and it's just a swamp of your own making, because there's absolutely no reason for it. Absolutely not. I can't think of one reason for you to get caught in that kind of quicksand based upon what's happened to you in your life. This is your own creation. And being your own creation, you can certainly change it, When I see you, I see Eliza Doolittle in My Fair Lady, it's amazing. So stop doing this and creating things that are not real anymore, old patterns that you should have let go of, a couple of years ago. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Stuart, I would like to ask a question. How do you see the relationship between religion and spiritualism?
How do I see it?
Yeah, I always believe that religion is the politics of spiritualism.
Well, look, to be honest with you, I'm not a very religious person. I'm a deeply spiritual person. And I think once you have a spiritual life, all of the dogma, all of the structures, all of the rules and regulations that are imposed upon people that live in religion, you don't need them anymore because you are a child of God and everything around you is a manifestation of God's energy. And you're living a spiritual life. It becomes a whole different reality and you don't need all of those structures anymore. I think people do need those structures because 98%, 90 more of the human race is not having a spiritual life. So they need structure in order to, sustain them and to keep them from going off the deep end. But if you're having a spiritual life, all of that falls away. I mean, you're living in a world where when you look out at the world you live in, everything is sacred. So you don't need the rules and the regulations. And most of religion is rules and regulation and politics and money, and frustrated people that, I hate to say it, sleep with, 8-year-old children. We don't need that, any of that. If you are connected to a higher force of energy, it's guiding your life, you're living your life that way. You recognize that the world you live in is a sacred world. And I'm not putting down religion because I think religion is a very important factor in this world. As I said just before, it really gives people rules and regulations to live by that maybe keeps them from going off the deep end. So it's an important factor in the world. But once you have that inner life and you connect it to spirit, and those rules and regulations are not necessary. One lives in accordance with an organic, nature inside themselves that truly helps them to do good in the world and not do nonsense and stupidity in the world. Once you're connected to God, your whole energy is about doing good in the world, about love. God is love. So I'm not a big fan of religion, although I'll repeat it again. I think it is a very essential ingredient in life because most people are not having a spiritual life. So they need some structure. And I can't put them down for that. It's, just part of the world.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question you would like to ask?
Stuart, I'll ask you about keeping the heart open. Talked about keeping the heart open and noticing the growth and all the benevolence of an individual. But could you talk about keeping the heart open for individuals, maybe close relatives or close people to us that are not actually benevolent, that are causing hurt or harm that's kind of blatant, and about keeping the heart open with respect to those individuals?
Look, I mean, to me, one of the greatest things ever said was said by a deeply spiritual being who is probably the greatest teacher, one of the greatest teachers, the Buddha. Forgive them, they know not what they do. And if you do forgive people, you'll have to keep your heart open. And I think that's an important factor. Forgive them. Most people, they do nonsense. They have no idea what they're doing. It's unconscious. It comes out of anger, unhappiness. It comes out of resentment, jealousy. They know not what they do. And we have to be big enough to forgive those people. I mean, man, I've had to forgive people that have done shit to me that I wouldn't even, I'd be afraid to even talk about the kind of stuff people have. And then I would go up and I would go to Rudy and Nietzsche. He said, the only way to get free of this is just forgive them and move on in your life. This is what they told me. And I did it and I was able to move on in my life. Didn't mean I have to hang out with those people or spend time with them or do anything. They were gone from my life, but I needed to forgive them because I had to move on in my life. And to forgive people, you have to open your heart. You can't forgive people with a closed heart. And I'm telling you some really horrible things I've had to go through with people, jealousy and all kinds of madness that people, magic and crap that and I went up to Rudy and Nityananda. I even went to Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi, and I got the same answer: forgive them and move on in your life. And you got to do it for yourself. Forget them, You have to move on in your life. And if you carry that, anger in your heart, it just keeps you from ever really moving on in your life. Well, it's not easy to do, but it's certainly, your being gets more highly evolved when you can do stuff like that. Does anyone else have a question you would like to ask? I mean, we're all, just to finish up with it, we're all here doing this meditation for a singular purpose, and that's to have a spiritual life. And to have a spiritual life, we have to learn, how to take steps on the ladder. And one of the biggest steps is learning how to forgive people. Because, there's so much bullshit in the world, there's so much nonsense and stupidity that people do in this world. And if you don't forgive people, you're going to walk around with a lump in your heart, that's going to make you really unhappy the rest of your life. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? I mean, I had to learn how to do this, trust me, the hard way. But I learned it as a matter of survival, of being able to move on and move forward in my life without anger at people for the stuff they did. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask?
Excuse me, Stuart. Going back to what Wendy asked you, do you have to forgive yourself first before you can forgive others fully?
Yes, Yes, look, you're not going to be able to forgive anyone else until you learn how to forgive yourself. You know, we have to do that. We all make mistakes. We've all, I mean, I won't speak for everybody, but people hurt people, relationships, marriages, children, parents. I mean, it's it's an epic novel about how people hurt each other. And in that process, we have to learn how to forgive ourselves for the things we have done to other people. Then we have to forgive other people for the things they're doing to us or they did to us. Both of those things are essential if you want to grow and if ultimately you want to have a spiritual life. Both of them are essential. I mean, I used to have students come to me and tell me about their parents having abused them and raped them and all kinds of stuff. And I used to listen and listen. And finally, I would say, look, you got to move on in your life. You know, you have to learn how to forgive them. Forgive them. They truly, you know, people that know and live consciously don't do things like that. They know not what they do. It's just brilliant. I mean, it's got to be one of those brilliant things ever written. Oh, how can I do that? Look, you're going to be miserable the rest of your life. You want to be miserable the rest of your life? Get big enough to forgive. Doesn't matter. They did something. Okay, it happened 20, 30 years ago. Let it go.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have a question? Great questions tonight. Thank you. Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? It's been a busy day for me, I'll tell you. All the classes, there's probably 60 something students have come to meditation today. My God. And I'm very grateful for it. You know, it means I have to grow. I have no choice but to grow and expand in myself. I mean, I remember when somebody asked Rudy that, I said, well, what happens if all these people show up? He said, I'll just have to get big enough to fit every one of them in my heart. I mean, that to me was profound, you know? Does anyone else have a question they would like to ask? Okay, well, God bless you all. Again, thank you for really being involved in this. And there'll be a class tomorrow evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. And bless you. Thank you.
God bless you. Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you.
Love, thank you.
Good night, Stuart.
Bye.
Thank you.
Great class.